gold and my heart and soul shoes. Walk among the groups of two. It's not ideal, it's just how we feel. It's a shame we're easily amused. The only cure for this forward motion is to make emotion fly away. The air is cold, but the water's not frozen. I see ripples rolling every day. Cast a stone and get a hardcore view. Catchphrase of the day is that it's true. There's no coffee talk and only one way to please. It's a shame what you do moves me. The only cure for this forward motion is to make emotion fly away.
There we are.
There you go.
I think it's working.
We're doing it ourselves.
Is it working?
This is going to be so interesting.
Oh,
Yep.
I hope it's working.
How's everybody today?
Somebody comment so we can see it's working. Oh, dear.
Okay. So what's all this about? Where's Lynn gone?
Where is Lynn? Well, we're running this solo of Lynn for now, at least, if we can manage it. And Lynn, yes, brilliant. Lynn is there.
Thanks,
you,
Lynn.
That's a bit reassuring. So, oh my God. Okay, this is terrifying, isn't it?
No,
anyway,
I'm
so
relaxed.
what are we doing today? We are actually going to bring a friend on, Oak, and he's going to introduce himself in a minute. That's what we're going to do, isn't it?
That's right. So,
so here we go.
Why don't you bring Connor on?
Yeah, I'm going to do that.
Connor, known as Oak.
Here we go. All right. There we are. You have to unmute yourself.
Unmute.
Hello.
G'day, Oak. How's it going?
Oh, very well. How are you guys?
Good, good. So just so everybody knows, Oak is part of a few online social media groups and provides a little bit of support for experiences as we do ourselves. And we got to know Oak and have been working with him in the background with a lot of other people. And I'm going to get Oak to just talk about the things that he does. And then after that, we're going to discuss some of the UFO hearings that have taken place. And then we're going to talk about some experiences stuff as well. So thanks and welcome to the show, Oak. And what could you tell us about what you do?
Thanks very much, Paul. Yeah, so basically the past year I've been focusing entirely on supporting experiencers since, I kind of went through experiences myself and a lot of people I know at the same time. And a lot of us kind of met on we were on a private subreddit. So on Reddit is not very well known for being very supportive of experiencers, and so a lot of valuable discussions happen behind the scenes. Because discussing this stuff publicly and openly and having a place where people can share, we have a private Discord as well, but myself and a friend of mine, I'll just refer to him as Mantis, we run the Experiencers subreddit and we keep that public. And the idea being that people can share, and we as a large enough moderator team, we'll kind of make sure the place does not get overrun by negative comments and putting people down, so people feel safe to share. Because the main thing I've witnessed is a lot of people I know are new to this, or suddenly new experience. It's not necessarily lifelong, suddenly awoken to all of this. And it really helps in terms of psychologically handling this, to be able to just talk to other people going through the same stuff. We're a social species, you know, that's how we process a lot of the time. So, you know, myself and a few others, we just dedicate as much time and all of our time to that. And it's been profound, and a lot of the magic has happened from, and you know, we've helped a lot of people, and it's just from having conversations. So that's what we mainly do.
So that, you know, like that's the thing is, I found myself when you go into some of these groups, it can be a little bit demoralising, and it's so great that you started that group up, and it has been a very positive experience for me as well. You know, wanting to share specific information and knowing that, you know, people are listening, you know, to what you're saying as well, because everybody has their own experiences, and you know, we need to let people talk about those experiences as well. I notice in the news is the Congress UFO information. Have you been talking to anybody about what's been said? What's
been the reaction?
Yeah, what's the reaction there?
I mean, there's been a wide array of reactions. I mean, the bulk of the reactions that I would have come from is just a lot of people are furious. I will say a lot of experiencers are furious. You know, I mean, there's that obviously that real need for validation by the wider world. I mean, wider world out there. One of the biggest difficulties is knowing something about reality that the bulk of the rest of the species denies is real. You know, so that could be very difficult. So you're really wanting to see everyone else to catch up, and so there's that, you know, understandable desire to see these kind of this Congress hearings, you know, front page news the next day, oh, aliens are real, etc., etc., ETs or this, that, and the other. So that, you know, and it can be insulting as well, like the lack of, when you really do know this is real, the lack of progress from officials is quite insulting. There's a lot of experiencers suffering because this stuff isn't admitted. So that's, I understand the rage. There's been some more, you know, measured discussions on it. You know, I mean, one thing I'm going to throw something positive in there, and it's not, you know, it's not much, but like I think there is progress being made. It's just very slow, and like I noticed, like, you know, with this report, you know, the newspapers are reporting this. Like today, for example, like my father handed me the Irish Times, which is a well-known newspaper here in Ireland, and there's a whole section on the, you know, U.S. Congress briefings on UFOs reveal little, but the article itself is very neutral. It's not belittling the subject at all. In fact, it's kind of reporting on how people waiting for real information will be frustrated. So, I mean, I think this plants seeds, and you know, it's frustrating as an experiencer now, but there's optimism regarding how it's planting seeds in people's minds where they feel like now they can talk about these things just because official newspapers and sources are just mentioning Congress and UFOs in a very serious manner without mocking it. So even though not a lot came from it, just the fact that that's happening actually does help legitimize people from feeling like they talk. Now it's not fast enough, but
for me it's like it's like a two-pronged thing. In one respect, it's really good. One of their first opening statements was they don't wish for people to be labeled as kooks anymore. Now, I know they were talking from a military perspective in terms of standardizing their reporting, et cetera, to, you know, to make these people witnesses rather than kooks. And it would be great if they could put that through for the public stuff. So, you know, for all those experiences out there who have only ever known ridicule and all the negative stuff that people avoid going out for, at least that's something. But it's so far from enough.
That was a question that was asked to the hearing. You know, what standardized process is there for people to actually report UAP or sightings? And they said that they really didn't have one. That they, you know, there were obviously non-government groups like MUFON, these sorts of people where people would go, but I thought that it would be really good if they actually standardized the process for reporting. I mean, look, we've got to think about two things here. We've got a group of people talking about things and then saying, well, if it's something that we don't want people to know, we'll just have a closed meeting after this. And that's what they did. They had one at lunchtime. And then you've got to think to yourself, well, then if they're doing that, what aren't they saying?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean that's how it's been reported as well. Like, I mean, if anybody who wants the real, anyone who wants the real juicy information, it's all hidden behind the private meetings. So but the fact that that's acknowledged in the reporting is interesting too.
Yeah.
I'm kind of feeling that people who might not necessarily be experienced but are interested in reporting on this are frustrated too at the lack of information coming out. I mean, it did seem like a performance. Like, I mean, the whole thing was a bit of a performance to a degree, and it was. It was the footage they chose to even talk about and all that kind of stuff.
You mean the UAP or whatever it was out of the plane window?
Yeah. I mean, this was filmed off an iPhone in a fighter jet. So they obviously have better footage, and it was like they know this will reach the papers, but anyone who watches it, will kind of see something that's almost like just almost belittling the efforts in a way. But there's clearly more. People are smart. They know there's more going on.
Well, as Justin says, it is a start, and that's true because now today in the papers, there's a lot of journalists asking questions and that. One thing that stuck out to me was right at the very beginning, they were talking about the possibility of the UAP being just hypersonic weaponry. Trying to segue it off that way. And honestly, if I was there, I would have typed in something like when you're bringing out the balloon.
Because
that's the swamp gas.
I wonder, any experiences who are listening on the side there, what did you make of it from a personal perspective, as potentially an experiencer yourself? Like, what do you think of that?
So if anyone's got any opinions or questions, put them up. Another thing that was said was that it said that when the UAP entered the airspace, that they believe that it's some sort of a drone. Now, what got me was when that was said so it's entering a confined airspace, but nobody's actually contacting it to say, like, you shouldn't be here.
So they say, if we believe them. That's
so
the thing.
They say.
So they say they haven't tried to communicate.
It
would probably be harder to answer, yes, we have tried to communicate and we've had zero response, or we have had a response, but it wasn't in the human language. You can imagine. I mean, what kind of response do you think the Zetas might send if the military tried to,
I don't know,
contact
a couple of clicks?
So it's probably easier to say, no, we didn't, even though that makes no sense whatsoever. Hang on,
what's that comment? The last time I saw a missile or flying weapon, it didn't hover.
It didn't stop, and it didn't make a 90-degree turn. What's with the 90-degree turns?
You mean what? You mean from
the craft?
The craft, or
well,
because they run on rails. And the Zetas have said that if you think about like fabric, like material, the fabric runs this way and runs that way, right? And it can also run diagonally. But generally, when you think about fabric, that it runs, the threads run different ways. The craft actually run on threads, and that's because they're drawing their energy from those threads for the craft. Okay, and this is why they're able to turn on any specific axis, because they're running on the threads. This is not very well known at all.
And it also explains why the craft looks so unstable when they have to slow right down and come off those threads as well. They, remember, you might have seen they look wobbly.
I get that question a lot from people. Why do these craft crash at low speeds? Well, from what we've found when the craft came down here, that they actually were using audible sounds that anybody could hear anywhere to actually navigate down. It was like a heterodyning process where they were looking to find the balance between the frequency so that they could navigate the craft down. I've never seen that before. They asked us to put the recording device on. I put it on. I'm quite happy to give that recording to anybody that's sort of technical or knows what they're doing, so that they can sort of assess that information. Because, I want, just like everybody else, for the information to be out there.
Lynn says, threads from the fabric of space-time.
Yeah.
There we go.
There you go, Lynn. That's right. All right. So, look, I've got a whole list of things that I could sit here and go through. You know, they said this, they said that. What I thought was interesting was the camera angles. When I'm talking to someone, I want to look at them, right? Because what you do is you're reading their facial structures, you're watching their eyes, you're watching their body language, you're seeing which way it's going. They seem to have this massive angle coming down all the time. They would occasionally flick around to the front, but that was very difficult to read, you know, a person's facial structure, what was going on, because I know that a lot of people do that. Okay.
Why are we interested in the body language?
Well, because the body language tells you if someone's actually telling the truth most times. Yeah. What's this question here from Justin? Could it be?
Hang on, I'll make it bigger.
Could it be that if they maneuver by thought, they could suddenly get distracted and lose focus?
Are you talking about the craft, Justin, or are you, are you talking about the people in the hearing?
In the hearing. No, that's really funny.
That would be really funny.
No. So the thing is that no. Can you imagine you're traveling at the speed of light and you go, "Oh, I need to go and get a donut." You know, no. The craft has its own consciousness, and the thing is that sometimes there's just malfunctions. This is the thing. These craft are designed to travel at specific speeds and also within defined types of gravitational pull. When they come to this planet, it may be that, you know, there's different things that the craft is having difficulty now. So this is why some of the craft have crashed. Yeah. What I found interesting in the hearing was that they talked about Blue Book.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. They said it was real. Yeah.
That's true. So
I liked all the little caveats they gave themselves to get out of answering questions.
Yeah.
Non-contractual arrangements. No, not aware of that.
One. Yeah.
Not aware of that.
I don't know about that. There's no contracted information about that. Okay, that's.
How did they describe Blue Book and
the ATIP?
Yeah, they described them as
they would have been official contracts,
official programs or whatever. And so when Roswell was asked about, no, we haven't heard about that program. That's not a program. So,
oh, what about? No, hang on. What about the Maelstrom incident?
What did they say?
That's a base. That was where the missiles were.
What they said about
and they said that they hadn't heard about it, and the congressman.
Oh, that's right.
The congressman said that. Sorry, he goes, what? Well, maybe you should look at that. I mean, that was pretty interesting as well.
They said they hadn't received any official report about it, and he said, "Well, how official is this?"
Yeah.
Go on.
So someone's saying, Bob says, "What, Oak? What do you think about aliens?"
What do I think of it? I mean, the way I've approached this to keep myself on this right now, I've had experiences. So I mean, I know there's non-human intelligence here and interacting with our species, and that's what I do know for sure, and that's how I'm able to, you know, I fully commit myself to this now, and I couldn't do that if it was still a mystery, or you know, or even if it was 99% I believed and 1% a mystery, I still couldn't. Yeah. I 100% know that there's non-human intelligence interacting with our species, and I really do feel like they likely have been since the dawn of humankind. You know, beyond that, I don't know. I don't know exactly what the phenomenon is. I do, you know, I discuss things in terms of ETs quite a lot, but I can't. I don't 100%. I think sometimes I wonder, is ET good enough? I don't think it's good enough an explanation for everything. It definitely isn't. There's more going on than just ETs. Absolutely. So I mean, that's kind of where I am. I'm fascinated, absolutely fascinated by it.
Yeah, from my experience, it's the contact I've had. I don't think that the categories are enough. That's the first thing. Firstly, we've got the astral encounters, okay, and they're non-extraterrestrial based, so they're astral life form. That's the first thing. The astral is the all of the thoughts, cognitive processes that a human's ever had, and from the beginning of the species, from day dot. So we've got that competing fabric with the physical is then interacting with interdimensional entities, non-human entities, which are classed, sort of as extraterrestrials. And they, considering there's something like, I don't know, 200 billion or 200 million galaxies, the potential for that, according to, I think it's the Drake equation, I'm not sure, would be that there could actually be that many just civilizations.
Mm-hmm.
We then have to think about the astral, interdimensional, non-corporeal, physical, and then we come to the phenomenon. And we look at consciousness. And when we look at consciousness, we understand that a lot of the stuff that's created can be created by our own minds and physically manifest. Some of this stuff is then manifested by spirit people. So now we've moved right to the other side of the conversation, where we're saying that spirit people can use the ectoplasmic life form of a human to manifest and create things, orbs, whatever. We've got ET creating orbs. We need to look at this as a conversation that's really wide as a range. And that's why when people go, and what do the aliens think? That question actually makes not much sense when you consider that which aliens are we talking about? Yeah. Exactly. Are we talking about the Honorians? Are we talking about the Sirius beings, the Palladians, the Zetas? There's like hundreds of races. So we need to try to work out from people which race are you talking about, or what perspective are you coming from? Because people try to make everything fit into one box. That doesn't work that way. Yeah.
Especially with this.
Yeah. So what are some of the questions that you've sort of had from your groups as you've been going along?
Especially with this.
What are some of the questions that you've sort of had from?
So I think I'm getting feedback there. I'm curious to since you were discussing how UFOs and craft operate, I'm curious to ask you if have you ever heard of Bob Lazar, and have you looked into his material? I'm curious what your opinion on, because he's someone who's extensively tried to explain how they operate. I have to. It's been a while since I looked up his information, but I wonder I'm curious what you think compared to what you know.
Well, we asked the Zetas about Bob's stuff a long time ago, and Element 115, and they said, of course, it exists.
Okay.
That was a long time
ago. That was
ago.
many years ago.
Yeah. And you've got that in your database.
Yeah.
For anyone who doesn't know, Paul has an extensive database.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
And what about yourself? I mean, so I heard that on 115, but what's your assessment on Lazar's story? Just as someone observing.
Look, to be honest, when you look at his story, for someone to put themselves out there as much as he has and be scrutinized as much as he has, I just feel that in some ways, some of the stuff that he's working on or has worked on in the past is legitimate. Mm-hmm. It's just legitimate. And, it doesn't matter whether it was back engineered craft or craft that they tried to build themselves and they never really worked properly or whatever. I mean, you would expect that people would do that. If we all had the ability to build craft in our backyards, we'd probably be doing that, wouldn't we?
I know I would. You already tried, but your cardboard box
I've got mine out of a cardboard box, but it never went anywhere.
On the topic of craft, I'd be curious to pick your brains on the various, like we've been talking about crashed UFOs since the 40s. I mean, it should probably earlier. What do you think is going on there? Do you believe they are crashing, and that potentially various governments across the globe have access to crash materials and potentially rebuilding their own craft from it, and why they crash?
Well, so let's talk about human nature for a start. You buy something and it breaks. Most people pull it apart and try and fix it, and sometimes you're successful, like an old clock or whatever. you would think that if something crashed and you had the technology or the ability to learn about the technology, that you would go out of your way to disassemble it and back engineer it, and then sort of try and make one yourself. So I don't see that the craft were ever crashed on purpose. That sounds like a recipe for disaster for multiple races to do something like that.
I asked them about that.
Okay.
And they said no, they would never crash on purpose.
Yeah. And so when we understand that, we know that people will back engineer things, will create, craft, all the rest of it. So, yeah, it is what it is.
There's various narratives out there that apparently some humans can, U.S. military or and so on, can shoot down these craft and have been actively shooting them down for decades. How do you think that's reasonable or possible? Or
I don't. Yeah, I think that's actually when we talk about that, I want to talk about fields rather than directed weaponry. It's more about things like, and not wanting to buy into conspiracy theories and these sorts of things. When we look at the way that energy is projected, when we look at the way that waves are projected, there's ways to create a distortion, and those distortions can affect things like your own Wi-Fi or your router can be affected by EMF and other things. The microwave oven, if you get an EMF detector, can emit high levels of EMF. And so these craft are also affected by high levels of distortions, waves, EMF, these sorts of things. That's my answer to that question. Okay. Probably a little bit vague, but there's a question there from Michael. Michael. Hey, Michael. I wondered, how do the Z's feel about the non-physical cohabitants, and to what degree they utilize them to interface with us? When we think about another race and the way that they think, that race it probably is not thinking in any way like a human would think. That's the first thing. And I'll give you an example. If you look at a butterfly, how does a butterfly think? We don't know. If we look at a dolphin, we can look at watch its behavior, but we don't really know what it thinks. And so with the extraterrestrials, the way that they perceive everything is via a highly expansive state. I've been with them and I've seen this, and they've allowed me to experience that with them. And if they're asked a question, there is no reaction from them in regards to a response. All they do is look out into the expansive field and see every nuance of possibility of answer, and then they statistically or mathematically provide the most correct possible answer from their perspective. So they do not think the way that humans do. Humans go, well, that made me feel this way, or I intuitively feel this, or cognitively I believe this. The Zetas do not think that way. So what's this? There's other questions there.
Hang on.
Oh, you talk.
There was one up here.
There's questions everywhere now. This is
there we go.
What are some of the biggest challenges for experiences in this space time as their perspectives on how to support resolve moving forward? Oak, they want to hear from you, me, and Cyan. So do you want to go first?
It's the classic challenges of just trying to function in a world that tells you what you know about it is not true, and when you know it is. And like I think we're in a kind of a new age now as experiences. I think it was much harder pre 2017. After 2017, everything kind of changed, and this stuff there is more support groups out there now, and more people to find that you can kind of process this with. Well, the biggest challenges are around what's the culture around you. Be it religious or atheists and all that, and how the social isolation you might get from wanting to share what you've been through. Now, it also depends on the experiences you've had. Like I'm kind of speaking about the more benevolent and kind of spiritual experiences. Some people have had very traumatic experiences, and of course, just the trauma from dealing with that is always the biggest challenge related to it. But
and the stigma and the ridicule that even comes even talking about it.
Yeah.
So what do you?
Yeah, I mean, following on from Oak there, I think the biggest challenges are yet to come. I think that as and when the governments do finally admit that all these things they can't explain actually are extraterrestrial consciousness in one form or another, all those people that haven't yet come forward for all the fear and ridicule are probably going to come forward, because now they feel like they can come forward. And then, oh my goodness, how many people are we talking about that have had these experiences with no resolution for their entire life, and given that these experiences have been going on for what, 3 generations?
Oh, many, but I mean, really, from an accelerated perspective.
Wow. How do we help all these potential swathes of people that are suddenly going to find the courage to come forward and say, look, I've been hiding this my entire life, I've been struggling with this my entire life, and now I can finally ask for help without fear of being locked up in an asylum, because that's how it feels like when you're trying to manage this stuff on your own. You can lose your mind with it. It's horrendous.
Oh yeah.
So I think there's a problem, and the problem is that the minute there's proper disclosure, then that means that there's an acknowledgement that people have been taken. What then do people do with that information? And if you imagine that you're, running a country, and this, and if we're just hypothesizing here, what do you do with all the people that have said that they have been taken? And how do you sort out who hasn't, who's actually had a dream encounter, who's actually had an astral encounter, who actually was taken? So I think it comes back to gathering evidence and data, and it's about, I can understand where they're coming from in regards to the hearing. They do need to standardise the reporting process. And if you document what happens to you, if you evidence that, you take photographic imagery, you date, time, document it, get people. Very, very good conversation that I listened to the other day was from Chris Bledsoe, and the way that a lot of scientists have come in and evidenced the contact that he's had. That's been very interesting to listen to him talk, and the information that's come from that as well. So I think that there's a lot of other issues.
And leading on from that, Chris there is asking what the difference is between astral travel, out-of-body experience, and do we ever meet Zeta in either of those?
No, you won't meet a Zeta in out-of-body experience, because when you OBE or in your astral, you're in the astral realms. The only thing that you would see that looked like a grey alien or an ET is what somebody has projected into the astral as their own thought process. So let's say I've seen an ET. Of course, that imagery, that avatar, is now existing in the astral. And so people, yes, in some respects you're dealing with it, but you're dealing with an avatar or a copy of that.
And having experienced that myself, it can be just as harrowing as having a full-on X-Files style contact with one of the greys. It feels just as real life feels right now, solid 3D, but not. It's incredibly confusing and can still take days and weeks to process.
Yeah. I saw Angels R Us had a question about craft and some metallic substance.
Do you want me to try and find
it? Yeah, if you could find that. Molten metal.
One? Hang on.
But I'm not sure. They say, I guess the real question would be, what would be the cause of a ship's propulsion to create a problem that they'd have to eject what molten metal was. Well, I mean, I've not heard of that. Which one is that? But just to back on that again, has anybody ever heard of nitinol?
I think it might.
It's and this is a different thing, but nitinol is a memory-based metal, and so it has a form like a paper clip, and then you can bend it all up, and when you let it go and then heat it, it bounces back to its true form.
That might be what Angels was talking about in this comment, which was the one that was the reply.
The craft crashed.
Molten metal stroke slag, so malleable metal.
Yeah. No, what I'm talking about is the nitinol. And the reason is I'm mentioning that is because we know that someone has said in the past that they had a piece of a craft and they couldn't bend it, but they also watched it reform itself back into the shape that it was previously. And then suddenly nitinol came onto the scheme. So anyone that's interested in that, you should look up nitinol because it's a very interesting metallic substance.
There is lots of reports actually of craft that seem to be dripping material off them.
I saw a video of where this craft's like up in a cloud, and there was this stuff that was sort of dripping. But I'm just wondering, hopefully, that's not meant, meant to happen. I guess you wouldn't want it not to happen, but no, I understand that, but. What is that? Nobody knows,
Yeah, it could be ice or something dripping off from the atmosphere or something. I don't know, but it's commonly reported. All right, and there's an idea about angel hair of
too much aluminium in the chemtrails.
Yeah, it could be. It could also be a meteorological process as well. That's the whole thing. I don't know if you've ever looked up and you've gone, "Wow, what's that?" And had anyone ever seen ball lightning?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's very strange. The way that ball lightning behaves, it can move through as though it's consciously navigating its way, but, it's still, it's a natural phenomenon, isn't it? George asks, what about the light beings? Where are they from? Well, when you say light beings, there's a question there.
Things.
Is that a being that's projecting their technology as light, or are you talking about a non-corporeal entity, an interdimensional entity that's actually existing outside of spirit realm? So, if we think about spirit realm as a sphere, and this is very, very basic. So, this is our planet. Above that or around it is spirit realm, and the entry point to spirit realm is called the nexus. Generally, light beings, celestial beings, interdimensional beings, they working in the frequency outside of the nexus. So that's where my experience and where I've seen these beings come from is. Other people will have obviously different opinions as well. Okay. Any other? Someone says the nitinol. Do you want to put that comment up? That one.
I'm on it. There we go.
The nitinol was the skin on the Roswell craft, if I understand the implication of the component correctly. Well done. What about the slag from the craft in trouble? And I think that we were just talking about that as well. I don't have any information on that.
No, I don't.
I mean, it looked really interesting. I've seen some videos, but
the Zetas have talked about the nitinol, haven't they? The malleable stuff, but they haven't talked about any, or haven't asked them about any.
Well, they can always be asked. That's the difference.
I tell you what, I'll ask them about that. I'm not quite sure how to phrase it. I'll probably need to read about it first.
Yeah.
So if I look up, okay, all right, I'll look that up and I'll ask them.
Angels are alive.
Hang on, that's it there. Thank you. There we go.
The island incident in Washington State happened before the Roswell situation. The molten metal slag hit a fishing boat and killed a fisherman's dog.
I will read about that, and
we will definitely look that up and see what we can get information about that. So Connor, Oak, known as Connor known as Oak. Are there other questions that you would be getting a lot of questions from experiences?
Yeah, what's like the common theme of, like, is there a theme that you hear from them, like?
I mean, there's a lot of people trying to figure out sometimes if they're dealing with spirit or ET. Sometimes it seems to be both. How to differentiate between either of the two can be difficult. Like, I mean, it seems both. I know some experiences have had encounters with what they presume to be an ET and ask it to communicate, and they'll communicate by knocking and stuff, which could be classified as poltergeist activity. So,
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot of overlaps, and sometimes it's hard for people to tell. I don't know if you have any insight on.
Yeah, so we see a lot of this. So I've got it into two categories. If you're getting ET contact, there'll be a wide range of phenomenon around you, as if the fabric of energy around you has shifted. And in saying that, then you'll be getting a lot of phenomenon like knocking or, you know, spirit sort of type energy going on as well. If the other applies, though, if it's just a spirit that you're having contact with, you won't be having contact with extraterrestrials. It's so interesting that the two types of manifestations provide different evidence. So what we find is that people are getting a lot of spirit contact, and they've got screen memories and don't know that they're having ET contact. That's becoming very, very a common thread for a lot of people. They don't realize that they've got the ET contact taking place. But once again, as I've said before, if they then start to talk about their experiences, you can usually sit there with a tick, you know, a checkbox, just go, you know, and it doesn't mean that you're not diagnosing in any way, but it's more about going, well, from my experience and of experiences I've had or other people have had, that it was obvious that that person was having some level of ET contact as well. So then you've got other people, they have no extraterrestrial contact at all, but they've got a lot of spirit contact. They're good psychics, they're good mediums, but they've not had any ET contact whatsoever. That spirit contact does not create the phenomenon of extraterrestrial contact. And I've seen that across hundreds and hundreds of people.
I've noticed that it seems to be the other way around a little bit, though. I mean, I don't know how much, but for example, because I talk to a lot of people who are just, you know, brand new experiences of it, just they've had some kind of sighting or an encounter with a being, and it's just basically completely blown up in their reality to this all being real. These are people who actually may have had latent mediumship abilities throughout their life that they probably suppressed or didn't believe. Suddenly they have this and experience. It opens up their consciousness to a degree, and next thing you know, they also have spirits, I guess, contacting them, or they, you know, instinctually develop, you know, I guess, you know, recognize their abilities, you know. Now, not everybody, this is very just, but it is something I've noticed that some very specific experiences have these latent abilities that an ET contact will awaken them up to it, and then they kind of begin a journey of discovering their mediumship skills and other psi abilities.
Yeah.
It's been quite fascinating.
And that's why we'll find, if we look deeper behind that, that the person has actually always had extraterrestrial contact, but they've got screen memories and they don't remember that they have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They just don't remember. And it doesn't matter what you ask them, they won't remember. They're called Class B screen memories. Class A. And the Class A screen memories are such that it doesn't matter which way you ask the question, the person will not remember that they have had ET contact. Yeah. And that's on purpose. But suddenly, one day something will happen, and they've developed some mediumistic stuff, and next thing you know, they get ET contact, and they think, oh, maybe that was a natural progression towards their own development. But you see, the extraterrestrials work generationally with people, and so it's not just that one person. It could have been the parents, the grandparents, or whatever. Yeah.
George asks, what descriptions of beings are the most common?
What do you think, Oak?
Yeah, what do you
The greys are the most common, and the greys, of course, vary heavily in all sorts of various descriptions. But generally, you know, a skinnier body, larger head, large dark eyes, and you know, weaker facial features. But they could be tall, short, and so on.
And then there's, you know, there's the discussion around that also is that if beings are able to move amongst the phenomenon the way that they do, what's to say that some other races aren't just projecting that imagery to hide their own, you know, their own true nature and mischief. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another common descriptor that comes up a lot is mantid beings. Now, nowhere near as common as greys, but I'm curious about your guys' opinions on mantid-like beings.
I had an encounter with some mantis beings, but they were a gateway race. And when I talk about gateway, we, through development processes, we created a method for creating a gateway, and that took a long time to do that. But on the other side of the gateway, you can meet multiple races, right? This comes to how you can travel consciously to different places as well. And I did meet some mantis beings, and I found them to be extremely caring and loving.
Yeah.
I've not had any negative interaction with them at all.
I tend to, that's the majority of reports of the mantids are actually correlate that, all right. I'm only get, you know, I presume it's similar to the other species. Like there's probably an array of different species that we would describe as humans would describe as looking mantid-like. So there is variations in how they look when people describe them. I mean, but nevertheless, do you feel like they're from a particular place or a particular species? Do they describe themselves as any name that you know of?
Oh no, I've not had any of them talk in that way. This is the thing. The one thing I've learned with beings is quite often they won't telepathically connect and speak in English and give English names. I think that's a projection that we project that to them. And so when the Zetas first came, they didn't know what English or language was, and they had to work out, you know, what was the finger, you know, and what is the sound for that. And so they have to read the scape, the mindscape, to work out what the languages are. And of course, that information goes into the collective mind of the race so that they can actually speak in that language to people. A lot of races do not do that, though. And, well, that's been my experience. So when I've come across other beings, they speak no words, but they just only speak in imagery. And that imagery is such that, and it's so precise that you're able to understand what they're saying just by using the images. Because, to be honest, an apple is an apple. It doesn't matter what you call it.
Yeah.
So if you're talking to me in images of ocean and birds or whatever, I can work out from the different construct what's being said rather than looking for specific words for a race.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that they don't use names because they're telepathic. You know, their descriptions of themselves will be an energy signature, and so because they're then trying to translate that into human language, they just have to pick what's in our consciousness. But then, as humans, though, we're limited because I mean, we want to categorize these beings so we know who we're dealing with and all that, or how to discuss them even, and then we're then limited to giving just descriptions on how they appear as a whole description of an entire, probably various civilizations. You know.
Well, you can imagine, so let's say millions of people are being contacted. Every single person has their own filtering system, their fear levels, their belief systems, their, you know, whether they believe in a God or whatever. And that is going to determine exactly the way that they will have any type of experience with a being. And this is the problem, is that I've said this last week. I've yet to see one contact protocol from extraterrestrials, not one. I haven't
one universal.
One universal, you know, people keep going, humans say, if we could just see a craft, well, that's what humans believe is some sort of a protocol, isn't it? If we all see a craft, then we'll believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you never get that from the ET. They never ever say, well, we'll just, show up in a craft. Because I guess from their perspective, they're going, that's not good enough. Because what would be a lot of people say if they suddenly saw a craft in the sky? Well, they've been lacing the atmosphere with stuff for years, and now that's a holographic projection. It was a weather balloon. Here's the pieces of it, all these sorts of things. And so they're watching this behaviour. They're seeing what people do, and they're like, well, what is a protocol that a planet could accept?
Every culture is different. Some countries we bow, in other countries we shake hands, in other countries rub noses. So it's different planetary worldwide.
We've got 10 minutes to go, and we've got all those questions.
I was going to say, Justin's just orbs. Are the orbs drones or projected consciousness?
Well, they're everything. Orbs are manifestations from spirits. Orbs are used to create proper crop circles. The orbs use the electrons in everything's created of molecular structure. The electrons are excited and heated up, and the stalks bend, and that's why they're able to bend them in any direction that they want to create specific, precise mathematical patterns for crop circles. If you look into crop circle technology, scientists have already found a lot of that information out. And the stalk, actually, interestingly, for where the orbs create them, it's always about something like between 8 and 12 inches up the shaft. It's not down the bottom. They're not bent over on the ground. Whereas when people create them, with boards, they flatten them. Whereas a lot of times there's a lot of overlap, and that sometimes these crop circles are about 8 inches thick. And multi-layered, so that's very interesting in regards to orbs.
Orbs can be spirit people, showing themselves as orbs.
They can be portals. They can be a drone that comes into the house, and next thing you know, it sends out a pulse. You're unconscious. Next thing you find yourself on a craft. So,
could they be astral projecting humans? And that we then see as an orb.
Yeah, there's everything, with orbs, everything's possible because one, you have to perceive an orb. That's the first thing. Secondly, you've got to be able to see it to know that it's there. It's no good saying there's an orb there, but you can't see it. And so if somebody's projecting, and I know I have said before on the show weeks ago, I said, when I see somebody astraling, I generally see a black shadow, but I've also seen people astraling in full form as well, and I have seen them as flashing lights and the rest of it. But it's up to us to know that we're working inside a holographic environment, and that the hologram can present the same things differently. And we need to understand we can't just go, it's always going to be that. It's not always going to be that.
Chris is asking, you said you've travelled consciously.
Yeah.
How is that different from astral travel or OBEing out of body?
So, Chris, there's sort of like three things there. You're talking about astraling, consciously, and then scrying, which could be considered something like remote viewing. There's a difference between OBE or out of body, because I'm full out of body and then turn around and see my physical body. Whereas we're beings of consciousness, we're observers, and so that way that we can actually view what takes place consciously in other spaces as well, without actually having to go there. We're just reading those threads of consciousness. Some would relate that to remote viewing. Once again, the minute we get back and we try and put everything into a box, that's where things start to break down, because consciousness doesn't fit in boxes.
Okay, there's another one there.
What is an ET?
Which looks human, can changing colour, go from green translucent overlay on Caucasian looking skin.
No idea. Never seen that.
So it's a human that has a green translucent overlay. It almost sounds like a spirit person being silly, having a bit of a...
But if it was a human and they were able to change skin colour, they'd be like a chameleon, wouldn't they?
They would, but I wonder if you get the hang of spirit realm and you want to show yourself as looking something different, maybe you could.
Spirit people can show themselves in any form that
Yeah.
they want.
Yeah, could be. I
Yeah.
don't know. Don't know. Angels, it could be many things. Could be many, many things.
All right.
Anyway.
Whew, what a lot of questions. That was really good.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
we've got just a few minutes left if there are any last minute questions.
So, Connor, is there anything that you wanted to say in regards to the groups that you run? Are people welcome into different groups?
Where can they come for support?
So they can find us on Reddit, on just Reddit /experiencers, and if I'm on there as Oak Driocht, and if anybody wants to kind of talk one-on-one or need access to a private Discord that we also run and have a lot of discussions on, they can private message me. But feel free to share experiences on that subreddit. We heavily police against negative comments that will tear down experiences and suppress them from sharing. There's nowhere else on Reddit that I know of that allows people to share this stuff, and it's important because one experience shared, who knows what other people, other experiences will read that and it will change their lives because they've seen somebody had the same experience as them. So
yeah.
So that's kind of what we do, and I'm here representing kind of a new wave of experiences who are kind of just suddenly waking up to all this, and I'm trying to figure this out as I go along as well. And all I know is that talking helps. So
it definitely helps.
You see, the difference is with your age group is that you're now part of the congressional hearings. You know, that information. This is where you guys are. When we started out, there was no technology, and the craft were coming, and that was interesting for me because when I listened to the hearings, they were talking about identifying technology as hypersonic technology. And I thought to myself, that's a bit silly because these craft for many, many years. And that hypersonic technology didn't exist anywhere, even in the last 10, 15 years or whatever, supposedly. So for people to be making those statements, they need to be looking at the history of ufology in regards to that. And that's what we're going to be doing with you, Connor, is looking into different aspects of ufology, experiences, questions on this show. Yeah?
Absolutely. Yeah. I can, anything that comes up from experiences I'm talking to throughout the week, I can then, raise those questions to you guys on this. So it'll be kind of be really cool.
So this is a really good venue for people to ask their questions and get some, hopefully some experience support from us and other people such as yourself, and see how we go.
Okay.
All right. Now, because we're running the show, we need to bring up the outro.
Yeah.
Cyan, do you want to not do that? No, we don't know how to do that.
Well,
that's okay.
We'll say thank you to Oak first because I can do that bit, and we'll speak to you later. Thank you.
Thanks so much for everything you do.
Oh,
okay.
Look at that. I totally got the wrong
Don't
screen.
worry about it.
Okay, well,
we'll just say goodbye to everybody now.
Yeah.
And we'll end the show.
How do I do that?
Up there's a button.
Thank
See you later,
everybody.
everybody. Bye.
Bye. Bye.